Good morning. I'm Kini, and this is going to be Storytime with Gunny, and it's brought to you by the Lance Corporal V. Lutz Live to Tell Foundation. So sitting to my left is this badass who happens to be a really good friend of mine, Gunny Jack Parsons. And one of the things I've been talking about for a long time is having story time with Gunny. So every month we have meetings at the Buddy Up, and one of my favorite parts of going to these meetings is hearing these stories that Gunny passes on. So I'm gonna allow Gunny to hop on this mic and just tell you a little bit about himself. So take it away, Gunny.
Oh, wow. When you're 71, there's a lot to talk about. Anyway, Kini and I really are friends, even though the first time I met him, I wanted to put his butt down. But that's a story that you can get online. Anyway, I joined the Corps April Fool's Day, 1965. I was 17. I looked 12. The recruiter actually thought it was a April Fool's joke because I was standing in this doorway and I was so small. And anyway, I left. I went down to Paris Island the next day. And I did my 4 years, got out, and then 9.5 years later, I went back in and started my career over at 31 years old as a Lance Corporal. And I didn't get out till 1989, and I didn't want to get out, but I had to. My wife of 18.5 years left me with a 15-year-old and 13-year-old boys, and you just can't deploy with boys, so family comes first. So that's the pitfalls of, you want to do something, man plans and God laughs. But during the time that I was in, and from the very beginning, all the way up until the day I left, there were so many wonderful things that happened. There were some negative things, of course, combat, losing people and stuff like that. But there's just so many great things about being a Marine. And you're a Marine to the day you die once you're ate up with it. And I realized one day when I met a woman named Janine Lutz that she made me cry when I talked to her. And she won my heart over. And so she began this program called Buddy Up, where guys from all services and first responders or anybody can get together and talk to each other, help each other when they're having a stressful day or whether they're just so despondent or they're depressed. We can do that. We don't need drugs to do it. We can do it together. And so the Buddy Up program has come really a long way since the first time I met Janine, and she works this all over the country now. Those of us who go to those meetings that Kini was talking about, on the last Thursday of each month. When we go to those meetings, it is incredible, the camaraderie. You have camaraderie from the military. Marines, we're just fabulous about that everywhere we go. Devil dog. And the other services just look at us like we're all crazy. But when we're in that room, it doesn't matter what service you were in or what era you were in, we're all together. And it's really, really important to understand that every single person in that room who has seen combat has stories to tell. And those are not fun stories necessarily, but they're stories that have to be told because it's part of our history and their history. And I really enjoy my time at the Buddy Up program, and I like the ability to come here and do this. But I want to say my story after my brother here says his, because he's got a good story. He told me so.
So it's funny how you our stories kind of parallel. So I went to the Marine Corps at 17 as well. I went to private school. I was kind of angry, and it kind of I had a epiphany one day, and I met a recruiter, and I was actually on my way to Coast Guard recruiter, believe it or not, because I knew I wanted to go into law enforcement. And I saw these Marines dressed in their dress blues on Fordham Road in the Bronx. Oh. And I said, shit, I would look really good in that uniform. So it kind of got me, and I went in there. And I remember talking to the recruiter, and I got my mom. I tricked my mom to sign the papers for me because I was 17. I was underage, and I needed her to sign the papers. So I told her the papers were for a field trip for school. So, that was an interesting story when I had to tell her that I was shipping out to the Marine Corps. She wasn't too happy about that. But, it was one of the best experiences I ever had. I made some great friends and some lifelong friends. And learned some life skills that, I carry on with me. I'm going to be 47, and there's still so many different things that have been ingrained in me from the Marine Corps that, you just can't do away from, So the first time I met Gunny at one of the meetings, I had on one of my recon hats, and one of the guys at the meeting was like, "Hey, have you met the Gunny?" And I was like, "No, who's that?" It was like, "Well, Gunny he was a Recon Marine too in Vietnam." So then I meet him at one of the meetings, and we just start talking. Knew a bunch of people in common, and I remember him telling me how when he was in boot camp, he got inspected for, was it final inspection, right?
Yeah.
Final inspection by Chesty Puller, and I was like, "Shit, this guy's old as shit." Because I remember in boot camp, every night they would make us say goodnight to Chesty Puller wherever you are. Did they do that when you went?
No, Chesty Puller was still alive. He died in 73. I was there in 65.
Yeah, so they would of course, so they wouldn't say that. But they made us say that every night, goodnight Chesty Puller wherever you are. So they hear that he was inspected in boot camp by Chesty Puller.
Actually, it wasn't boot camp. I was a PFC in the India Company, 3rd Battalion, 6th Marines. Chesty Puller comes back every year to Camp Lejeune because his last command was as the 2nd Marine Division commander. Then he had a heart attack, and so they gave him 3-star general and retired him. But he would come back, and every year he would ride by, and it wasn't just division. Everybody on the base, everybody in FSSG, 40,000 guys out on the line. That's pretty impressive to see.
Yeah,
and
it
he
really
would come
is.
by in a Jeep and inspect everybody. And there was one company who was in camouflage because the general made us wear camouflage to separate us from everybody else because we were that good of a company. We had a great company commander, great Gunny. And he saw us, and he pulled over, and he inspected everybody in the company. And I was an AR man. Back then you had an M14 with bipods, and you didn't do inspection arms. You just put your butt of your rifle out, and you put your magazine in your hand, and he came up and he talks to you. And I can tell you that the most amazing thing was his eyes are so intense that he could melt the shoe polish off your leather boots just by looking at you. But he was this coolest guy when he talked to you. He wasn't arrogant. He didn't act like a general. He was just a Marine talking to a Marine, a fellow Marine. And he let you understand why he was such a great leader and why they still talk about him. And every night in every boot camp in America, every platoon says, "Goodnight, Chesty," wherever you are.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
That is. I mean, it speaks volumes about, his character. So when you're in the Marine Corps, what'd you do, Gunny?
Well, when I first went in the Marine Corps, first of all, getting in the Marine Corps was really hard because I was not qualified to be in the military. I have a dislocated right finger, index finger, and you cannot have a dislocated joint in your hand and get in the military. It's called 3P. You're disqualified. So when I went in the first morning in April of 65, they had 40 guys lined up in Philadelphia, and a Navy chief was coming down inspecting everybody, and he made everybody put their fists out. You had to make fists, and they inspected it by and tapped them with a pencil. And I was in a panic because, as you can see, it won't go. So I made my hands like that, and I put them down, and the guy came by and tapped them, and I got in. So I got in the Marine Corps illegally, if you would. And in fact, the recruiter gave me the paperwork to go back home to see a police check, which is illegal, and a PC, which is a parental consent, and that was illegal. They must do it. And so I didn't know I was illegally put in the Marine Corps, but it didn't really matter as long as I got in. And so I get to Parris Island, and, when you go down there, the first thing they do is they make you do drill with your rifle inside so that you don't embarrass them outside.
Yeah.
So you spend your first few days doing right shoulder, left shoulder, port arms, up and down, over and again. And so I'm there, and I've got right shoulder arms, and one of my drill instructors walks by, and he sees my finger sticking out, and he goes, "Put that finger in," and he pushed on it, and the rifle fell off my shoulder, and he caught it, and he goes, "Make a fist." I made a fist, and he goes, he just jumps up and down screaming, "How did you get here?" And I went like this with my two hands. And he looked at me and he goes, "You want it that bad?" And I go, "Yes, sir." He threw that rifle at me, hit me in the chest with it, knocked me back into my bunk, like to break my ribs. But he was letting me know, okay, and he never said another word about it. So I was in, even though I was not qualified to join the military.
Wow. So how soon after you went to boot camp did they send you guys up to Nam?
Well, here back in 65, it was still voluntary. You could volunteer to go to Vietnam, and it wasn't like everybody just went. So what happened is I started to volunteer, but I was only 17, and so every week you could put your name on the list, and every week the first sergeant scratched my name off the list, but I put it on anyway. They literally had a clipboard on the wall in the barracks, and you could volunteer for Vietnam. And sometimes 7, 8 guys would volunteer, and they would go. In fact, my first fire team leader, he went to Vietnam, and he died on December 15th, 1965, and it broke my heart. He was one tough, really cool guy. He was also the middleweight champion for the boxing team for the Marine Corps at Camp Lejeune. And he was he won a Bronze Star in 1965 down in Santo Domingo as an AR man, an automatic rifleman. And he's the one that taught me how to be an AR man. And he was really good at what he did. And he saved his platoon by getting in an alley by himself, and he killed 8 guys trying to sneak down up behind him. And he did it all on his own. Nobody told him to do it. So he got a Bronze Star that day. Very sharp guy. So, everybody was volunteering. I thought, that's what I joined for, to go. But I couldn't go. Then I'm trying to go, and I turn 18, and they said, you can't go. And I go, what do you mean I can't go? They said, you can't go. You have orders to go to National Security Agency, and they've already put your name in, and they're starting to do the background check on you. It was a $23,000 cost to do a background check for a top secret clearance. In fact, it was called a final top secret clearance. Now, the interesting thing is, at that same time, you could buy a Mustang for $2,200.
Yeah.
And they're doing a $23,000 background check on you. You're not going to get to go to Vietnam because you've got to go to this suck place. And nobody in their right mind who's a real Marine would ever want to go to a Marine barracks because they're just tiresome. They're just drill. It's just every day, spit and polish, spit and polish, spit and polish, spit and polish, but no field work, no shooting, no real Marine stuff. Is all just bullshit. So I went to the Caribbean. We went to, the first thing we did in January of 66, we fired the Stoner weapon system for the military. And I tell you what, we got screwed when they didn't pick up that weapon. We never, not one person ever had a jammed round in that. And an entire company fired thousands upon thousands of rounds in 30-round magazines in a weapon that could be converted to 7 different weapons. We called it the Johnny 7. And that was a fabulous system. And we got done doing that. I actually got to shoot the automatic rifle, the machine gun, off my shoulder with a 150-round box for Commandant Wallace M. Green. And he stood right next to me while I cut 2 pop-up targets in half. And he went, geez, that's incredible. I said, yes, sir, you can hold this on target. It's not like an M60. So, that was pretty cool. Then we did riot control training. Then we went to the Caribbean, and we spent 6 months down there getting ready for Vietnam. And we had a tough company commander. Tough. I mean, tough. And one day it was so hot down in Puerto Rico and in Villegas, they said, no training today, it's too hot. And we're out there doing fire team rushes up the side of a mountain. And up comes the doctor and the colonel. And they start yelling at the company commander. He didn't take yelling real well. He was like 6'4". He was a boxer from Yale. He was tough. And he said, hey, I'm getting these men ready for Vietnam. There's not going to be a quitting time over there. They need to be able to do what they have to do. And he won the argument, and the other 2 got in a Jeep and drove him. And we just every day rode up and down the hills, doing fire team and squad skirmishes and races. And it was tough, but at the end of the day, we were the toughest company, and we were well trained and well prepared for where we had to go. And I really liked the guy. I mean, I admired him. He later went to Quezon and won a Silver Star there and made major. And then they ordered him back to division rear, and he refused to leave his men. He said, I'll leave when my men leave. And, of course, he never made colonel because of that. But that's the kind of guy he was. You'd get in a foxhole with this dude, okay? And so I was very fortunate. I had people like that who were really good Marines who trained us. I had guys from the Second World War, from Iwo Jima, from Tarawa, from Okinawa. I had guys, in fact, the man who taught me about booby traps fought in a place called the Chosan Reservoir. Wow. He was a 24-year sergeant. You can't have 24-year sergeants today, but he was a 24-year sergeant. And he taught us about booby traps. And these are the caliber people who literally gave their heart and soul to us. And so when I say I've touched magic and I've been touched by the history of this Corps, when you're trained by guys who went up onto the beach at Iwo, you're not talking about people you don't listen to. You listen because what they have to say will save your life. And one of the reasons me and my men are here today is because those guys trained me, and I'm just eternally grateful for them. And then after that, I went to Fort Meade, Maryland, National Security Agency, and that was the most suck duty you could ever in a million years want, unless you're just a geek who likes to go in the rear. It felt like a riff, like I was a typist. But anyway, it was just the duty I didn't want. So I literally I had to go nose to nose with the colonel and go through bad times. I got busted from corporal to lance corporal and went on mess duty and had a tough time. They put me on mess duty for 60 days. And so I had to go to my congressman to get off of mess duty. And that's when they shit their pants because they didn't want the congressman to do an investigation. So they sent me to Vietnam, which was really great. And I got there, and the third day we get mortared. And I'm being buried by a mortar in this trench line going, I can't believe I fought so hard to get here. I made a big mistake because, you think you understand what combat's going to be like and what mortars sound like and what machine guns, and then all of a sudden it happens and your mouth gets dry, your stomach gets tight, and you're shaking and you're shitting, you can't even think straight, and you're like, oh, dude, I really didn't do this on purpose, did I? There I was, knee deep in hand grenades, and it just was a long, long year, but I wouldn't trade it for all the money on earth. When we would do our reunions, we started our first reunion 30 years after the war. When we do our reunions, one time I was sitting there and we had guys from 1965 to 1970. If you served in Golf Company, you came to the reunion. And I was in Reno, Nevada, standing there with a room full of people and their wives, and I looked out over them and I said, listen, in case you're wondering how important you are, all the money in the world can't get you a plate here tonight. Bill Gates can't sit with us. I don't care what kind of money he has. He didn't earn a place here. You earned this. You earned your right here. Nobody gets to buy in. And I meant that. They understood. This was hollow ground, okay? So I walked among heroes. Yeah. I wouldn't change a minute of it. So then I got out of the Marine Corps because they wouldn't send me back to Vietnam. And 9.5 years later, I went back in as a Lance Corporal and started my career over. I couldn't go to Force Recon right away because my orders said division. And I was only on a 2-year probationary period because they had never had somebody who was out in 9.5 years come back in. I was the first, and they wanted to see how I would do. And so I went to Recon Battalion. 7 o'clock in the morning, I ran the in-dock. You had to run the PFT for time, then twice through the obstacle course, then put a 50-pound pack on and run 5 miles through the dunes and go down to this one area where there was a little tiny orange dot 1 mile offshore. It was a buoy they put out. You had to swim around and come back, side stroke and breaststroke. And I was a really weak swimmer. Fortunately, there was a guy named John Story who stayed next to me talking to me while the guys bumped into me with their little metal boat. Come on, old man, get in the truck. We have coffee and donuts back at the 3 shop. Come on, get in the boat. And he's like, don't listen to them. And they're literally hitting me in the head with their boat. They didn't want to stay out there. I was so slow. When I say slow, I mean slow. Then I get to the beach. I'm so wasted, I can't stand up. So they have to lift me up in the surf zone and try to get my feet to work. I walk up to the beach. The beach is so sandy, so they push me to the dirt road, and I'm running down the dirt road, and it's a 5-mile run, and I'm just looking at my feet. I can't think of anything else. I'm just looking at my feet come out from under my body, and I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? And I don't know how I did it. I can tell you, I was really, really tired when I got done, and I'm standing there, and I'm like wobbling in the hallway, and you have to be interviewed. And this guy comes by, and he's got, the old green swim trunks we had and the green shirt and sneakers. He has no rank on. I don't know who he is. So he says to me, are you the retread? And I go, what the hell is a retread? And he goes, you were out and came back in. I go, yeah. He goes, were you in Vietnam? I go, well, of course I was in Vietnam. And he goes, who were you with? I said, Golf 27. And he says, were you on Allenbrook? And I go, yeah, I'm Jake. He said, you're Jake. I said, oh, my God, because I was the point for the battalion and the regiment when we did multi-battalion operations. And he takes me into his room. He had been a first lieutenant in Fox Company on Allenbrook, about 1,500 yards behind us. And so we sat in his office for an hour catching up. We had coffee. We talked. And it was just incredible. He was a great, great, great man. And so I came out. When, by the way, he said to me, what's your name? I said, Jack. He said, I'm John. We shook hands, and we went into his office. Well, I wasn't paying attention because I was so messed up, but the sergeant major was standing there. He patiently waited for me to come out of the office, and then he spit in my face as he was talking to me, and he goes, well, Jack, were you talking to John? Get in my office. I get in this office. I'm standing there. I'm trying to be attention. I can't. I'm wobbling. And he goes, I said, Sergeant Major, please. I got up yesterday at 3 o'clock in the morning. I traveled all night. I got in at 2 o'clock here, and I'm just a little tired right now. I messed up. I forgot I was on that corporal in the Marine Corps. He says, he reached across the desk, and he shook my hand, and he said, "Welcome home, Marine." I really, really like that. And he said, "Let's get you some uniforms." And he got me a Jeep, and I went over inside and got uniforms. I don't remember any of it. It was a fog to me. And in the morning, they had to pull me out of bed because I couldn't stand up. I was pretty sore from that indoc. But that was the beginning of the greatest adventure of my life. I mean, come on. Recon Marines, you know that. You're a Recon Marine. It's like a different breed of cat. And you just stand differently. You see differently. You do things that only people, they talk about. And they always talk about, oh, those Recon guys are crazy. Yes, they are. Every one of them.
See, my experience was different. I had no desire to actually go to Recon at first. I was like, I don't want to go over there, those crazy fucking guys. And and I wasn't a super, super strong swimmer. I mean, I was able to swim. I wasn't an aqua rock or anything like that. But I wanted to go to Anglicor. I was a 2531 comm guy, and we had just gotten the Legion from 29 Palms. And I had a cousin who was a staff sergeant in 2nd Anglicor. So he was like, he came by receiving. He's like, "Listen, cuz, I got you. Don't worry. I'm going to get you in the Anglicor, blah, blah, whatever. So I'm like, shit, I'm straight. Go to Chow and come back from Chow. And the first sergeant's like, "Cole, pack your stuff up. You guys picked up." So I'm swagging out like I'm going. And he goes, "You guys are all going to Recon, 2nd Recon Battalion." And so I remember, like, when you first get to receiving, the guys would come from Recon Battalion and they'd say, "Hey, do you want to take the NDOC?" And I was like, "I don't want to take that shit," And then I remember asking the first sergeant. I said, "First sergeant, I thought going to Recon and was voluntary." He was like, "No, your ass is being voluntold, so go pack your shit."
Not for communicators. All communicators are drafted.
Exactly. He said they have a critical need for communicators. So about 12 of us that came back that were 2531s all went to Recon Battalion. So I remember getting up there to Anzo Beach, and it was a corporal. His name was Corporal McGee, and he had us out on the beach. And I remember it was pouring raining, and he tells us, we all lined up on the beach, and he tells me, now mind you, there was only 2 black guys there. There was myself and a guy named Williams. So I remember him coming down. He goes, "I don't know what we've done for the gods to bless us. Well, not only 1 black unicorn, but we have 2. So I'm looking like, what the fuck is a black unicorn? And it took a minute for it to click. And I look around. I'm like, shit, there's only 1 other green marine here, dark green marine here. And that was myself and this guy, Williams. So he comes by and he tells us, "I want you guys to chase raindrops. And when I come back, I want you to have a handful of water." And we're looking at each other like, what is he talking about? Yeah, how are we going to do that? So we're standing out in the rain with our hands like this trying to pull water so we get a handful of water. And he comes back probably about an hour later. But during this time, I'm holding my hand like this, trying to get water in my hand, and it's just little puddles, like little puddles of water. Yeah. So finally I get frustrated, and I say, you know what? I'm going to go. And I go into the surf, and I scoop up a handful of water and come back and stand in line. So he comes back, and he walks down the line. People have like little pools of water in their hand. I got a whole handful of water. And he comes over, he goes, "Cole," he goes, "That's good to go." And he takes his finger and he sticks it in the water and he tastes it. And he's like, "Go get wet and sandy." And that was my first day at 2nd Recon Battalion. But,
wet and sandy, like a sugar cookie?
Like a sugar cookie, So, like Gunny said, it was one of those things, man. I kind of ended up there accidentally, but it was one of the best things that ever happened. It changed my life. I met some great men, learned a lot of great things, and it's actually probably gotten me as far as I've gotten in life. And the experience there's no brotherhood like it, You can look at a guy and just know, that this guy laid his life down for you. So it's a brotherhood like no other.
It really is. It's like when you think of the military, the Marine Corps in particular, at the time when we were in Recon, there were 220,000 Marines on active duty. There were 155,000 reservist Marines who, by the way, later got called up for Iraq and Afghanistan. And there were, when I was in 2nd Force Recon, 36 field operatives in the company. There was like 64 guys in the company, and there was only 36 guys for the field. That's a pretty small group, but you weren't allowed to think of yourself as elite because that's just not the way we are. But, you know, the reality of it is 220,000 Marines, 155,000 reservists, and 36 guys who jump out of planes for a living and, you know, go behind up to 500 miles behind enemy lines. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty elite organization, and it's, you know, they don't give it away. You got to earn every single step of it, as you know. You know about RIP School, Recon Indoctrination Program. It's a tough day from the moment you open your eyes to the moment you close them. It's a long day from 4 in the morning till midnight. And I know because I've ran 3 RIP schools in Recon Battalion. And rain or shine, winter or summer, it makes no difference. We did things that were just off the chart strange. For instance, we would run 5 miles down the beach where nobody could see you, way down towards the end, towards the inlet. And we would get naked, and I would take my heel and I would put a line in the sand. And from the behind that line, you ran, and you had to dive through 3 waves, come back, do push-ups, dive through 3 waves, come back, and do flutter kicks. And obviously, it was 25 and 5 for the push-ups, 25 and 5 for recon, and then the same with flutter kicks. You had to do 30 flutter kicks, and you just kept this up. And it was 7 degrees out. 7 degrees. And it was interesting, the guys who would break, the great big guys with all the muscles would be standing there holding their crotch going, I don't want to go back. And these little guys, these little tough little son of a guns are just diving in the water like animals. They're like, they're eating it up. They're hoorahing and stuff. And it's just amazing how it's in the mind. It's not in the body. Yeah. It's not how big you are. It's how tough you are. And these guys just totally amazed me. No matter what I did, they were there. They would never quit. I saw the guy from Philadelphia. You'd like this little tiny guy, Pete. He only come up to your chest pocket, just a tiny bit of a wisp of a guy. We're doing the in-dock. We get to the pool. You have to jump off the 15-meter board into the water, fully clothed with your pack and flak jacket and boots and a rifle. Then you take your pack off and your flak jacket and put your rifle on your shoulder and do some. You know, with your hands out of the water, treading water. This guy gets in the water and goes all the way to the bottom. It's a 12-foot pool. He's down at the bottom, standing there. So I yell across to the corpsman who's standing there. I said, "What's he doing?" He takes his mask. He looks in the water. He goes, "He's just standing there."
His back probably way more than he did, huh?
He couldn't swim a stroke. But he's standing there. I'm like, what kind of maniac would do that? So we had to go down and pull him up. 2 guys pulled him up, get him out. And I go, what the hell were you thinking? Why would you do that? And he goes, well, I can't swim. Sergeant Parsons, I said, why did you enter the water? He goes, because I knew if I didn't, you wouldn't keep me. And I said, well, you stood down there on the bottom waiting for what? He goes, well, I knew you guys would come get me. I said, the point is, that's a trainable Marine.
Absolutely.
We kept him. We trained him to swim. He became a great swimmer in WSSI. But he started standing on the bottom of the pool. You can't make this stuff up. These are the caliber of people that you run into, and they have heart. And this kid came from Philadelphia, and I was born and raised in Philly, so I really took a closeness to this guy. But when he would put his parachute on, it would drag down behind his thighs. And we had to help him get up into it. If we were going to jump from a Huey, we had to lift him up and put him on the seat because he couldn't get up on it. He was so tiny. But he would go off that. He would jump every day with us. He just couldn't handle the size of it all. He was so small. But I'll tell you what, I'd get in the foxhole with that boy in a minute. Those are the kind of guys you meet that you remember all your lives.
It's funny because you said one of the things that stood out was you said when you go to Indoc and you were like, I don't know how I got out to go and I had to run 5 miles and I don't know how I did it. And I tell you, they would always say, you know, you would look and you'd be like, I don't think I can do it, or, you know, how am I going to do it? And they'd say, put one foot in front of the other.
That's right.
And that mindset just stays with you, and you carry it throughout life. Like whenever I have a tough time with anything, I'm always like, you know what? Only way to get through it is just put one foot in front of the other, you know. And it's kind of one of those things that's ingrained in you, you know. Like I said, I wasn't the best swimmer at all, but by any stretch of imagination. But I had some really good guys with me that, you know, where I was deficient, they'd help me out. Like treading water, man. Listen,
I was so bad at ARS. Me and Doc Downey, the corpsman, we were the worst swimmers. Everybody's matched up by speed. You know, you swim in twos, and everybody's gone. They're down the road now, and we're still out in the water just floundering around because I was a really poor swimmer. I had to work at becoming WSSI and work at becoming good with fins. And over the years, I became extremely good at swimming, but it wasn't something that happened by itself. Yeah. You literally have to work at it. But every single thing you're tasked with, there's a reason for it. And while you're doing it, sometimes you're not aware of it. Just like boot camp. We're not aware of why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, they know what they're doing pretty well, but you're just there being pushed up, down, yelled at, hollered at, back when I went, beaten. But, the bottom line is at the end, what they turn out is a known commodity. And that commodity is someone who will hold the line. They will hold the line. And really, that's what the Marine Corps has been around since they began. And whether we're guys coming in today or guys who just got out of the military today or going all the way back to the very first guys who walked into Ton Tavern back in Philadelphia, they're no different. Every single one of them is a known commodity. And they feel the pride of never quitting and never giving up on each other. And yes, there's lots of guys who don't pass the induct, get into recon, or even pass RIP school or pass ARS. But the bottom line is that's a small percentage because most of them do get through because they have the desire to be different and to walk among some pretty tough guys.
So how do you feel? I remember back when I was in, we were kind of like the bastard stepchildren. We were like a necessary evil. Now it's the cool. We're like we're the cool kids on the block now. Back then we were kind of like the bastard stepchildren. We would get all the hand-me-down stuff.
It's funny you should say that. One day I was on the beach. We were getting ready to go to Norway for Teamwork 80, and I had Scamp with me. Scamp. They used to do. We do recon. They go Scamp. These are the guys with the piece heads that you put out and listen to people move around and stuff. And so they're coming with us. So I'm training them in IBS training, itty bitty ship. The IBS is an inflatable boat, small, and of course the ones we had been around since the Second World War. There were patches on the patches of the patches on these things, and they would barely hold air. So one day, coming down while I'm out there with 5 boats and all these guys, and we're training. Down comes my colonel and the general. And the commanding general is pretty cool. And he asks a question. First thing, he had been in recon many years ago, and he started to ask me about the set of the wave. I knew instantly who I was talking to. So he said, how's your equipment? And I go, it sucks, General. I said, if you were in recon, you worked with these boats. The patches on here that you put on are still here, and we have patches on them. We have brand new boats down in the scuba locker that nobody will break out because we're afraid that we won't pass inspection if we use the good boats. So we have to take these pieces of shit and take them overseas with us. This is wrong. And he said, I agree. And he turned to the colonel and he goes, I want every one of those new boats out and blown up today, just like that. I thought the colonel was going to hate me, but later on he said, that was pretty ballsy of you. But the point is, we didn't have good equipment. No. We didn't have good anything because we were the bastards of the 2nd Marine Division. And whenever they didn't like somebody, they dumped them there.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. We had a guy come in one day. I was running the 3rd Platoon, Charlie Company. And in the door came this guy. Nice enough fellow, Lance Corporal. But he was so illiterate, he couldn't even pass to be the dog catcher for Camp Lejeune. So where'd they throw him in recon naked? So I'm talking to this guy, and I'm looking at his SRB and his service record book, and I realize this guy is not one of the brightest bulbs in the chandelier. He's just barely literate. So I'm talking with him, and I'm trying to find out what is his strength. Who is he? Where's he come from? He comes from upstate Pennsylvania, and his sister is deaf. So his parents and he know how to do sign language. And a light bulb goes off, and I go, oh, good. You're going to teach everybody sign language. You see what I mean? I wanted him to use his strength. He had something nobody else had in the platoon, and it made him stand out and become special just by that. And so you could take somebody who could barely get around and do stuff, and you can train them by developing their strong suits. And I was taught that by the guys who taught me back in the 60s. So it was interesting to watch this guy come to life and flourish. And there was another guy who was a Puerto Rican who could barely speak a word of English. Don't ask me how he got in the Marine Corps. All I know is he came from Puerto Rico, and he spoke fluent Spanish and no English. And so, but he was a great artist. So I had him draw all the different configurations of A, B, C, D with their hands on the blackboard. And so those two gave classes. One drew and the other one talked. And everyone in my platoon learned sign language. What would be the benefit of that? Well, there's many. The first thing is, in an NBC environment, when you can't talk through the mask 20 feet away, you need to be able to communicate with your hands. And so we could. When you're underwater as a diver, you can't communicate unless you can use your hands. Well, the SEALs hated us because we could go down and do working dives in Naples, and we were all talking, and they were looking at us like, what the hell do you do this? But we also learned that we could get on top of two different mountains, far apart over a valley, look through binoculars, stick a hand out of a bush, and send messages that nobody else could do, and we could do it in an EW environment. When nobody could communicate, Recon could communicate from mountain to mountain, from valley to valley, and all because a guy with a 69 IQ taught us American Sign Language. Is that incredible?
Yeah, that is.
And he made meritorious corporal because of it, and he felt like a part of the team. And while he was doing that, we were teaching him to teach us how to call for fire. Artillery, call for fire, naval gunfire, call for fire, and he learned it through rote, doing it over and over and over again. But he could later call for fire on a radio because he learned it by teaching people American Sign Language. Wow. An incredible story of somebody being used to their fullest potential. And when you think of all the groups you've been in, when you think of all the people you know in your life, every single one has a specialty that if we tap it, will teach us and clearly help us get over problems, handle things. It's amazing. One of the things about Buddy Up is everybody in that room is different, but everybody's the same.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. See, but that, you look at that, it's a sign of strong leadership. Like one of the things I learned in Marine Corps is about being a leader, like leading from the front. And the sad part about the civilian world is a lot of people lead, but not a lot of people are leaders. And a real true leader recognize people's talents, like you just said. You recognize his talents and the other guy's talents, and you say, you know what, this is what I'm going to do to help you help yourself and to make you see what your talents are, to use you to the best of your abilities. And that guy flourished. If you take somebody and you show them and you recognize what they're good at, and you give them a task and say, hey, this is what you're good at. We want you to teach us that. That person's going to flourish because you actually took the time to show them that they were important, and that what they were doing was something that was something that nobody else had. So that made him want to stand out. It made him want to do, to be better and to learn. And it's funny that you said the sign language thing, that he taught you guys sign language, because part of our creed is being able to speak without saying a sound.
That's right. And here's a funny story. Back when I was out at the beach one day, we had this colonel and a lieutenant and a sergeant come, and they were going to give us, every year the Marine Corps they test you for your abilities and stuff. So we're outside getting ready to go into the field, and we all have our masks on, and we're standing there and we're talking. I'm talking to the men in front of the platoon, and these guys are going to grade us. I said, you can't come. And he goes, what? And I said, you can't come. And he goes, I don't understand. I said, sir, you're not qualified. You can't come. And he's like, well, we're going to come. I said, no, you're not. You're not qualified. You cannot grade us if you don't know what we're doing. So I went to my colonel and I said, he can't grade us. He can't come with us. He's not certified to come out with us. And he said to him, he's right, you can't go. And they didn't know what to do because he came down from division to inspect us. Well, he wasn't qualified to inspect us, so bring somebody down who can know sign language, because you're not talking when we're on patrol. It was that important. And these are the kinds of things that, you literally have to be able to look somebody in the eye and say to them, I'm sorry, you're not going to get to do that today, because we are better than you. And we really were. And that's why I say I'm so fortunate to have chosen to go to Recon when I did. The people, the mindset of the people was just off the chart cool. We got a battalion commander in one time named J.J. Clancy. He had been in Vietnam in 3rd Force Recon. He had 2 Silver Stars, 2 or 3 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts. He was one tough old dog. I mean, he never wore starched chilies. He always wore he was a field Marine all the way. And the day he came there, he put fear of God in everybody. He said, I want every piece of equipment out today. We're going to do this. He had already done it before he came there. And I got to work for him. He said he put me in the 3 shop to work for him, to work directly for him. And he was one cool guy, smart. And he made full bird colonel and went off to work for the CIA in South America. But he was one tough hombre. And what he did, you talk about good leadership. He wanted every single first sergeant to have his picture taken in front of his company logo outside the barracks, and then each one of the platoon sergeants and each one of the team leaders. And then he made a board for his office, so he knew every team leader. He had a picture of every team leader. He had a picture of every platoon sergeant, and he had a picture of the first sergeant. He didn't have any lieutenants or command. He only wanted the guys who were the doers of the deed. And then he was really cool. He has the whole unit together, and he goes, until I know everybody in this unit, when I'm walking down the street, you don't salute me and say, good morning, sir, good afternoon, sir. You give me your name. So it's kind of like, PFC Smith, sir, Lance Corporal Jones, sir. Everybody was saluting this guy, telling him his name until he became familiar with everyone in the unit. When you lead like that, you're real hard to not have a great unit. I mean, you're just the pride that comes along with having a battalion commander who literally wants to know the name of every man in his unit. You don't buy that down the street. That's good stuff.
Yeah, that speaks volumes. I mean, I remember we were like, the Marine Corps was one of the last holdouts for
MARSOC,
for the Special Operations Command.
Yes.
We were like the last holdout for years. I mean, so that played a big part in why we didn't get a lot of the cool guy gear, and we got all the leftover gear and stuff like that. So when these guys became part of Special Operations Command, I mean, they just tossed tons of money at these guys, and they got all those cool schools that you'd have to beg and try to kiss ass to get.
Your own pools, your own everything.
Everything.
I mean, everything. We had to use the pools on the base. We had 3 pools on the base, and we had 2 on main side and 1 over at Camp Johnson. And I used to do all my training at Camp Johnson Saturday mornings because there was nobody there. And that's what we had to do. But later to have all these really cool deep pools and things you can put 40, 50 guys in and train, we couldn't do it that way before.
Yeah.
You're right.
So I think it was probably one of the best things that happened to them is actually because it kind of
MARSOC equaled money.
It meant money, and these guys they've gotten some of the best schools that you can get. Like we would have to, beg, borrow, and steal to try to get into school, like in some of these schools that these guys get to go to.
Well, Halo, for instance, was real hard to get into. But at one time, I was very fortunate to be there at the time. One time at the Halo Jump School, there was an Army Sergeant First Class, and there were 4 instructors. All 4 instructors were sergeants from Force Recon.
Wow.
Yeah, the instructors at the Halo School for the Army had Marine instructors there. That was pretty cool. But you couldn't get quotas, not like today. I mean, almost everybody gets to go to Halo. But
it's part of it. Now it's part of the pipeline, so
Yes.
they get it guaranteed for the most part.
Yeah.
And now they even have. So I'm an instructor for a special operations prep program called South Florida Tactical Athletes, and a lot of these guys now they're going guaranteed contracts. Like like when we were in, there was no guarantee. No guarantee. You had to go to SOI, become an 0311,
and then
volunteer to try out. And now these guys are getting a guaranteed shot to go. So they go to boot camp, go straight from boot camp to SOI, and then from SOI they go to I think it's like a prep program to get them ready for pre-ARS. I think.
I got to tell you a story because as soon as you said that, I remember something so powerful. I used to recruit every week. All the people coming into Camp Lejeune would meet the general in the gymnasium, and there'd be hundreds of people checking in, and it was mandatory that they meet the sergeant major and then the commanding general, and he would speak to them and welcome them aboard. And then I had an opportunity to go up and ask anybody who would like to try for recon, come over here and sit down with me and bring your SRB, and they would. And one day, this guy comes over to me. He's a Lance Corporal. He's a black Marine, squared away to the max. This guy looks like a poster. And he says to me, Sergeant Parsons, I'd like to go to recon. However, I can't swim. But I can do it. If you train me, I can do it. And I go, really? He said, yeah. So I said, yeah, I'll take a chance on you. I take him out. I put him in the training platoon. This guy worked harder than anybody in the battalion. He wanted to be a recon Marine, and he trained himself to swim hour after hour after hour. He became a really good swimmer. He became one of the best Marines I ever had. And so I put him up for meritorious corporal. He smoked it. I mean, he smoked it. So here he is, a corporal. And all of a sudden, we got very few jump quotas came to 2nd Recon because they all went to Force Recon. Mm-hmm. And we got one in, and they usually go right to an officer, so they can look good in uniform. So I went up and I talked to the battalion commander. I said, I got a man. I want him to go to jump school. He is one squared away Marine. He's going to stay in forever. He's good. And so Crawford went to jump school and came back. And when I tell you, when he walked in that barracks in his Alphas with those lead sleds on his chest, you could shoot him and not knock him down. He was so proud of what he had accomplished because nobody else had jump wings in the school and the thing. So we go on, and all of a sudden I'm running pre-scubas, and one day I look up and there's Crawford in the pre-scuba class. You got balls, son. You got balls. And goddamn, if he didn't pass my pre-scuba and went to scuba school and passed, and now he's a dual full, and he's walking around in his uniform. So time came to have a meritorious sergeant promotion board, and this guy was the best team leader I had. I put him up for it. And he, as you know, when you go up for meritorious, you sit before a board and people ask you a wide range of questions and this and that. He smoked it. They told me he didn't miss or pause at anything. He was so well studied. And when I saw that guy standing there as a sergeant, my heart just went. It was like he earned everything he had, but he had the balls to try. When he knew he couldn't swim for shit, but he did it anyway. He knew what he wanted, and damn if he didn't get it. You can't stop somebody like that. That guy Crawford was one of the finest Marines I ever had the pleasure of serving with, and all he was a scared lance corporal when I met him. But when I last saw him walking down the street, he's a sergeant with jump wings and a scuba pin. He was, as they say where we come from, truly badass. I was proud to serve with that guy.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah,
man.
it's a good story. But he was on Teamwork 80 with us, and he was great. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do. He volunteered for everything, and he was always on point. He was always up there. He was always and his boat skills. Come on, the guy was just good. He was a great Recon Marine. I enjoyed serving with him.
So what is one of your favorite memories from the community? Like your all-time favorite? Like if you had to pick, I mean, you got tons and tons of stories, but if you had to pick one of your all-time favorites, what would it be?
Well, on Teamwork 80, we were in Norway, and I knew where their command was, their regimental command. And I wanted to get in there and fuck with them. So what we did is we took a CH-53 and we went 10 miles out of the area and we dropped off and we walked all day and all night, 10 miles to get to their command. And what we did is everything was facing south where the good guys were, or us. And we just came in the back way and went up on top of this hill behind their command. And it was very hard to get up. We had to climb up and stuff. My whole platoon got up there and we set up this giant perimeter and we observed everything they were doing. And right below us, about 100 feet below us under this cliff, was this tank, if you would. It was it was a personnel carrier, but it was their communication thing. It's how they jammed. It's how they listened in on everything from this thing. But it was hot in there. And so every time they came out, I had a guy looking with binoculars and he put his thumb up and we would communicate. And this is important, we were 64 miles away, 64 miles. And we used a field expedient antenna. Now, anybody who knows anything about the radios back then, you could only communicate 15 miles max. Yeah. We had this big copper wire. And we had it hooked up in the top of the tree, and we just literally took the radio, put it down, and aimed it by azimuth back to our command post, and we began to communicate every time these guys get out of there, and they were listening to us. They could hear us clearly, and what we had to do was put comm wire out on the side so it didn't go off and nobody else could hear us. So we were blocking what we were sending, and we told them every single thing the Norwegians did, and they were like, how do they know? How do they know what we're doing? If three jeeps left and went down the road, we would call them, and in would come a Harrier, or not a Harrier at the time, but a thing, and do a strike on them. So they would lose those vehicles, and the umpires would say, okay, these can't be here anymore. And every single thing they did, when their planes or helicopters took off, we knew. And so we were interdicting them right from the time they started to leave their regimental headquarters. They were just so pissed. We were there for 5 days. And at Index, they told us to come down. Well, we just lined everybody up. We walked down right into their command post and waved to them, walked out. And they were standing there with their tents, and the looks on their faces was total disbelief that an entire platoon of Marines had spent 5 days inside their command post, and they were unaware.
That is so
and
bad.
that only happens when everybody is doing their very best to be totally quiet. Yeah. To dig a cat hole quietly so that they can defecate, so they can live and eat and leave no trace that they're there. That's when you know you're with professionals. And these guys were the ultimate professional recon Marines, and we kicked the Norwegians' ass. I was very proud. I mean, extremely proud of those guys when we got back, and everybody was standing there going, "How did you guys do that?" And we did, because I had a good platoon of great recon Marines.
Well, that's awesome. Hey, so it's funny. I had I was on my Facebook page, and one of the memories came up, and one of the memories that came up was the day that we gave Dale his paddle.
Yes, I like that. I like Dale. And
so I shared it with a couple of people, man. It was just because a lot of people don't realize the history behind it, and how big it is for you to receive a paddle. And just to give you an idea of the magnitude of it, I had a really good friend of mine who worked with me named Nick Walker. He was a first Recon Marine during Vietnam. And a couple years ago, he passed away from liver cancer, due to complications from Agent Orange.
Sure.
And I mean, it was pretty fast. Like we found out about it like maybe a month before, and then within 2 months he was gone. But while he was here in the hospital, right before they were going to move him up to Maryland to be close to his family for his in his last couple of days, I actually made a paddle for him, and I went to the hospital to go see him. And when I walked in with that paddle, to see this grown man just burst into tears, and it was a whole room full of our coworkers and other friends that were there, and they kind of just they looked, and they all burst. They started crying because they saw him crying, and they didn't understand why he was crying, and they all left the room, and gave us the room so we could sit down and talk. And he was like, he goes, you don't know. He goes, I want to thank you because you know what this means. He goes, when I left Vietnam, he was like, and came home, we didn't get this honor. Like nobody, you were so worried about whether you were going to get a job coming home, and, people weren't as hoorah as they are for the military now back then, especially if you're coming back home from Vietnam. So to see that, and then and that actually kind of sparked the whole, kind of a movement for me, like these guys that served during Vietnam and other eras, to do that for them, so that they're able to have these things that they were entitled to, they never got a shot at. Now, it kind of pisses me off when I see people, I was on social media, and this guy who was like he worked in some office. He was like an office guy, an admin guy, and they gave him a paddle for his going away. And I just looked at me, and it just ate me up, because I was like, this is such a rich tradition that, you just don't want to do it frivolously. And I still, today, one of my favorite all-time stories to tell is the day that I gave this man his paddle. But I'll let him tell the story, because he tells it better than I tell it.
The truth of the matter is this. We were having some really tough times because the NFL, the guys were taking knees, and we had a meeting, And there were these girls in there who were actually cheerleaders for the Miami Dolphins. And the week before, because we were doing it on Thursday, the Sunday before, 4 guys from the Miami Dolphins took knees. And, of course, the piece of shit who's the guy in charge of the NFL, he should be horsewhipped and sent home. These guys are out there doing this, not paying attention to the fact that they're called the NFL, the National Football League, and they're taking a knee during the national anthem. So they're disrespecting every man whose body I carried off a battlefield. They're disrespecting my father, my grandfather, everybody who ever served their country. They don't care because they have an agenda, and their agenda takes precedence over what I feel is just wrong. So Kini's in the kitchen with me, and we're talking, and he says, "Hey, did you get the tickets for this Sunday's game? Because they're giving them out." And I went, "Did you take the tickets?" And he went, "Yeah." And I went, "You communist son of a bitch. How could you do that? I can't believe you would do that." And he's like, "Well, it's no big deal." I go, "It's a big fucking deal." So I have no idea he's got this paddle for me. And so they call me up to the front of the room, and we come up to the front of the room, and I just begin. I go off on everybody. And, in fact, there was a woman filming me from the side. I didn't even know she was. And that thing went viral all over the internet.
I think she was a reporter or something like that.
No, she's a
blogger.
She does. She's a blogger, but she's an author. She has books, and she just happened to be filming while I was talking. And I told the whole room, I said, "This is wrong, guys. We cannot be going to NFL games and supporting them if they're going to treat me and my men and all the guys I ever served with like this. It's just wrong." And so Kini's standing behind me with this paddle. I have no idea he's going to take. It's all wrapped up. And I turn to him and I start yelling at him for taking these tickets. And he unwraps it and he goes, "Here." And I'm like, "Oh, you motherfucker." But the interesting thing was about 180,000 people saw that video.
Yeah.
And then this was 2016. And then the following year, 2 million people saw it because it came back. They brought it up again. And the bottom line is, I was very angry. I think his name's Goodall, whatever it is. And I said, if he was in the room, I'd break his jaw because I was really that angry that he couldn't stand there and say, this is just wrong at so many levels. I mean, think about it. We have a man from the Pittsburgh Steelers who's he's a country's hero. He's a serviceman from the Army. He's a Bronze Star, Purple Heart winner. And he comes out and puts his hand on his chest while the whole rest of the coward crew is back there in the locker room. And then the coach yells at him and makes him apologize for doing that. I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I'd beat all their asses. They might be big and tough, but they can't beat me because I'm brain dead. They can punch me till their hands get sore. I'm telling you, it was just wrong. And I'm saddened by the fact that everybody thinks it's okay to support that kind of behavior. When I'm telling you, as a man not 21 years old, I carried a lot of body bags. I saw a lot of people die, and I honor them. I could never watch another football game or go to a football game until somebody makes a big change. That's just me, maybe. But he suffered that night, giving me that. But let me tell you something. This is important. That was the first time I ever had a paddle. Because when I left Force Recon, they were all in Norway. And I walked out the door by myself that day going onto recruiting duty. And it was the loneliest day I felt in my life. But when he gave me that paddle, I put it right on my desk. It sits right in front of me. So every day I see it. And I told him just a week ago, I said, I see that every day. And I'm thankful that I know you and you're my friend, because that means more to me than just a little bit. It's just big. And so it sits right on my desk. It's not hung up on a wall somewhere. I see it every day. I can look at it 5, 6, 7, 10 times a day. It's really important. And the things that you do for the people that you know is important. It really matters. And everything that we do with Buddy Up matters. If we save one life, if we save one guy who's despondent or just depressed or his meds are messing him up, if we can get to that person and reach them and save that person, you can't buy that. It's that important. That's why when Janine first started this whole thing about Buddy Up, she had my undivided attention. She is my hero.
Absolutely.
And when she holds those meetings and you watch these guys, and there are guys and girls in there and they suffer. They do. But they have a place to go and off gas, and nobody judges them or says, you're a fucking idiot, or what's wrong with you? There's nothing wrong with us. We saw things we weren't supposed to see. We did things we shouldn't have been doing, but we did. And PTSD isn't new. I read a lot of history. And the Romans and the Greeks, when they came back from battle, they suffered also. Did you know that?
Yeah.
We have history. History says so.
It's been known by a bunch of different names. I mean, guys like shell shock,
Battle fatigue. Yeah.
battle fatigue. It's been, but it's always been the same thing. It's just every era names it something totally different. One thing you said in the beginning when we first started was about meeting Janine.
Yes.
And, the way I met Janine was it was Memorial Day weekend, and I wanted to take my kids to do something to show them, the true meaning of Memorial Day weekend,
right.
And not just, having a barbecue and setting off fireworks or anything like that. So we came across the memorial, the movie memorial,
right?
And it was at the bikes, the rest stop on 27. The
yes,
bikes.
Right.
So took the kids there. I met a bunch, and it was packed. It was so many. The Leatherneck Motorcycle Club was there, and a bunch of other people were there. And I walked around, and I saw a few people I knew on the wall, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing. So I go up, and I meet her, and we start talking, and she's like, why don't you? And she starts explaining the whole organization to me, and immediately I was taken by it, and I said, you know what, this is something I want to be a part of. And she said, hey, we have meetings on these days, that that day, this day, and so on and so forth. And I've been working in law enforcement for over 27 years now, and that plus the military and stuff in the military, working in Ground Zero, you don't realize, I think because of what we did, you kind of learn how to push that stuff down, because you have to ask a mic, so you kind of push all your feelings down. I lost 10 friends in Ground Zero, and countless other friends in other situations. But I remember one of the scariest days was walking out. I stood outside that meeting, outside the door, before I went in, for about 10 minutes before I would go to the door. And Janine happened to be coming out, going to her car to get something. And she said, hey, she grabbed me by the hand. Hey, what are you doing outside? Come on. And she took me inside. And that was the beginning of an era, for me, where I knew, I was like, this is something I want to be involved with. Like, this lady changed my life. She changed the lives of so many different people. And I was just, I was like, in my mind, what can I do to help? So I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and one of the things I told Janine was like, you know what I want to do? I want to offer jiu-jitsu to all these vets. Any vet that wants to train, I want them to come train with me. And at the time, I had a big gym open in Margate, and I was like, so I started having these vets that would come from Buddy Up, and one vet would tell another vet, and they would come train with me. And before you knew it, I had a bunch of vets that would come to train, and it was amazing, because I saw these guys who would walk in the door and they'd look like they were going through something, and they'd sit down on the mat, and before we train, we'd always have like a kind of like a little mini Buddy Up on the mat, right? And we start talking. So I labeled it choke therapy. Yeah, ironically enough. So these guys would come in, and you could look at the guys that were having something going on, and we talk, and then we train, and those guys would walk out of there with the biggest smiles on their face, and they felt great, and they were like, you know what, it was hard to get here, how to push myself to get here, but I got out of the house and I came, and I'm so glad that I came. So realizing how powerful it was to use this art as a form of therapy, and to try to get some of these, these guys off of the cocktails that the VA put them on, that made them not want to leave the house and not want to do anything. I started seeing, guys coming on a regular basis, and, and I started getting involved with these guys, on a personal level, and, and it went from being just an instructor in jiu-jitsu to being a resume writer, being a kind of like a mentor, or, like a counselor. And, I can't tell you how many resumes I've rewritten, because the career counselors write these resumes, right, knows how to blow up stuff. Can shoot somebody from 1,000 yards. That's not going to get you a job in the real world.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
So I rewrote all these guys' resumes, and and there's guys that have gotten some great jobs and they're doing great. A lot of guys got off the medication. So I realized that for me was a calling. So I closed my gym down and moved everything to my garage in my house. And I started teaching at my garage for free. And since then, I probably had about 60 vets, come in and out,
Cool.
and come and train. And in December, I think it was, I got an award from Department of Homeland Security for humanitarian, being a humanitarian. And I got the award. A lot of people don't realize the story, because when they wrote up they did the write up, they didn't go into a whole lot of detail about why I got the award. But I thought it was important that they put it down, because the way I got this award and what led to this award was directly related to Buddy Up.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't realize that. So at a meeting at Buddy Up one day, there was a vet that comes in, and we just start talking, younger guy, and I give him my card and say, hey, man, I teach jiu-jitsu for free. Come and train. Whenever you want to come train, just give me a call. And after that meeting, a couple days later, he calls me up at about 1 o'clock, almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm I'm a night owl, so I'm watching TV, and I happen to be up, and he calls me up, and he says, I got a bottle of Jack Daniels on the table and my .45 pistol on the table. And when I'm finished with this bottle of Jack, I'm gonna shoot myself. So I stayed on the phone with him. I said, give me your address. I went to his house, sat down with him, took the gun off the table, and I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to finish this bottle of Jack with you, but when we're done with this bottle of Jack, I'm going to take you to get some help. And he agreed, and we drank that bottle of Jack until the sun came up, and then I took him and got him some help. And, and I think that ideally is the goal of this program. The goal of this program is to help us continue to save our brothers and sisters, to reach back and pull them up out of the trenches, when things are going on. And,
Always beside me.
Exactly. That's, so that's one of the things we always say in Recon is, never above you, never below you, always beside you. And we carry that, we take that to heart. We really do. If one of us is going through something, we're all going through something. And, I remember going to see this dude in the hospital when he lost his dancing shoe. And, it was one of those things that I was like, you know what? This is probably the toughest dude I know. Like, I was like, I'm honored to be his friend. Like, I probably wouldn't have met him. I would have maybe met him through the community, because our community is pretty small. But would I have the relationship that I have with him now? Like, I look up to him as a, not only as a brother, but, as a mentor. And, and like I said, one of the things I always told Janine is we have to do this story time with Gunny, because he's like a walking time capsule, and he has so many stories that I think they're important to share with people.
I have a story. I was in the hospital, as you know, many, many times. I had so many operations I lost count. But during the last 5 years, I spent almost 2 years in the VA hospital. 78 days one time, 63 another time, 90 days another time, just constantly in and out. And the one person who always came to visit me on a weekly basis was Janine. She literally, every time I looked up, Janine was coming in. She would have flags, plaques, cool things, and just sit there and give her time to me. And, I just fell in love with her. She just can't do enough for people. And you can't be phony about that. She's a real deal. And the very first time I met her, a woman gave me a card that she was passing out at the VFW because she was trying to put together a motorcycle rally ride for her son and for the Buddy Up program. And so I called her, and it was like 7 o'clock at night. And so she said, I'll be right there. And she got in her car and drove to the VFW there in Fort Lauderdale. And we started talking. We're sitting at a table in the back room. It's just her and I. And she made me cry. She made me cry. She broke my heart. I went, oh my God. So she had never done any of that. So I said, I was at the Leathernecks at the time. I said, let me put together the ride for you and help you do it. And we used the Leathernecks to set up the parking lot and everything else. And then everything that went on that day, we had trucks and food trucks and stuff. So I had this guy, and he was from Fox News in Miami. And he had covered the Fort Lauderdale airport one time when they had these guys coming back from the honor flight in the Second World War vets coming back from Washington. And there must have been 500 people there that night. And there was maybe 60 different bikers from different groups. And this one guy, he was a major in the Army Special Forces. And he said, Gunny, you got the loudest voice. Get out here and call the bikers to attention. So when all these guys started coming off in their wheelchairs, all these bikers were, and I said, real loud, bikers, out, and saluting, everybody's saluting. And these guys are coming down, and this one guy's the second guy in line, and he's a Second World War vet, and he starts to cry, and he goes, I knew there'd be a Marine here somewhere. and it was so cool. They filmed that. And the guy from Channel 7 News filmed it, and it went national. I had guys from Montana calling me, Gunny, I just saw you on the TV. What are you doing? I go, nothing. I was just helping these guys come home from a trip to Washington. And so here she's putting this first ride together, and we're going to go out there. And I call the same guy from Fox News, and he comes out. This is to show you how good she is, what she does. He's there with me in the morning. The bikes aren't there yet. I'm there early. I'm setting up the stands and the food, and she's putting the wall together with all the different pictures of all the people who've committed suicide. So this guy comes up and he starts talking to me. He's got his camera on his shoulder, and he's got the microphone sticking out this way in his hand. And he just starts talking to me. And I look up. I'm not stupid. I see the red light, and he starts asking me questions. So I start answering him, and he goes, Gunny, I can only give you 20 minutes. And I go, really? 20 minutes? We won't even get started. So he said, why? And I go, you'll see. So he was only going to give us 20 minutes because he had other things he had to do that day. 6 hours later, he's standing there talking to me. Janine came and stole the show. She had this giant white elephant, and on the side of it in red she had PTSD. And so we have all these people in this pavilion. They have all these pictures and everybody. And I'm the MC. I'm trying to get from one to the other, and all of a sudden it's Janine's turn to talk, and she comes up and she's holding this white elephant. She goes, let's talk about the elephant in the room. And she throws it up in the air, and it breaks in all these pieces. And he filmed that. He loved that scene. And it just blew everybody away because nobody would have expected that. But she got everybody's attention for, we need to talk about PTSD here and what it means. And later that day, she had this jump team came in, and they were cool too. But most of the people were gone by the time they came in because it was later. But it was an incredible day. But when that guy walked away and shook my hand, he goes, Gunny, I don't care what you're doing. You call me, I'm there. Because it was a great show, and we have it all on tape. I don't know what they did with it at Fox News, but it's all there.
That's awesome.
So,
I remember I had a buddy of mine that called me up. His best friend's son, who was a Marine, was killed in a carjacking. I know you remember that. I think you were in the hospital when that happened. And he calls me up. He said, "Listen, man, I know you do a lot of stuff with vets, and you're involved in a bunch of programs." He goes, "My best friend's son, who was a Marine, he was killed in a carjacking this weekend, and I just want to see what we can do. The family doesn't know where to begin." I told him, I said, "Leave it to me. I'll take care of it." I called Janine, and I said, "This is the situation." She was like, let's make some phone calls. And she brought the tank out. We had a bunch of guys from Buddy Up that came out, and she actually put out something to one of the bike clubs, and there was probably about 200 bikes that actually escorted him to the cemetery. The news came out, and it was an amazing day. And
it's so important for the family to see that kind of support.
Yeah, absolutely. And my buddy came up. He had just flown back from Puerto Rico. He was out in Puerto Rico working a case and whatever. And he came up, and he goes, "I can't thank you guys so much, enough, because this meant so much to his family." So, she's an amazing, like I said, like you said, she's an amazing lady, and there's we have countless stories like that about her. And, it's just it's a great organization. Like Gunny said, we meet, once a month it's usually the third Thursday of every month. And if you go online, you could find, the Lance Corporal Lutz Buddy Up Foundation, or you can go to Facebook and find us on Facebook, Live to Tell, and it'll give you all the details for where the meetings are. And ironically enough, since we were talking about the NFL, did you know how that whole taking a knee started?
Yes.
Did you know that it was a SF operator that gave him the idea? The whole thing started from a letter. I had no idea. So the whole thing started from a letter. This Special Forces operator who was, he was pissed off like everybody was about, the fact that he was sitting down at the beginning. Remember,
Yes.
Kaepernick was sitting down. So he wrote Kaepernick a letter and said, I understand, your protests and blah, 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 whatever. He said, but I think, I could get behind it if you did something that was that showed a lot more respect. He goes, when you sit down during the national anthem, it means this, that, and this. It means this to me. It means that to me. He goes, I think if you found a better way to protest, it would come across differently. So he said, if you look online, you'll see pictures of. He goes, one of the things that happens is when one of our brothers, falls in combat, we'll go to their gravesite and we take a knee, at their gravesite. And that's how the whole taking a knee thing started. And I had no clue that it came from that. And somebody asked me, they were like, well, how do you feel about the fact that it came from somebody that was from the idea came from somebody that was in the veteran community? So my question to you is, how do you feel about that?
I understand that, and I can appreciate that. But what I don't appreciate is the fact that if you look at this guy, Kaepernick, okay, a guy who was worth millions, a guy who grew up in an upper middle class family. I grew up poor with 9 kids in an Irish home in a row home in Philadelphia. So I don't want to hear the bullshit about whether you're poor or whether you're not. Poor doesn't mean that you have no morals. Poor means you're poor. This guy grew up having everything handed to him. And all of a sudden, he wants to make a name for himself. But what you need to do is find out who he really is. Who is Colin Kaepernick? He's a communist. Got it? Not just word communist. He is and believes in communism or anti-American. So if you're a communist and you are anti-American and everything of the American values or whatever, you have to address that. You need to come out and say, hey, I hate America, and here's why. Okay, say it. Don't hide behind it. Say it. And his girlfriend, anti-American. So what is it that he had to do? Now, I realize that there's a lot about this, and then it's all racial, a lot of, the stuff, got it. But, and is this a perfect world? No. Are there a bunch of idiots out here? Yes. There's racism on both sides of the coin. I know, because I dated a girl in college, and her father drug her by the hair in the house, and her brother said, if you ever come back here again, we'll kill you. So I know about that. So it runs both sides of the coin. The problem is we need to step away from that and deal with the issue. The issue is it's a National Football League where they make millions and millions of dollars a year. I don't have millions. I've raised 7 boys without being a millionaire. And these guys think that they're special and they get to do things like that. Well, they don't. You want to do something of value? Go to the VA hospital. Do something. You want to do something that makes a difference? Get together with every person who wants to take a knee and go to Chicago, walk into the neighborhoods and go, stop killing each other, because we need to stop that. Those are the things that make a difference, not pissing people off. So, yeah, I'm sure that you come up with all sorts of reasons why, but the basics line is why? Why is that so important to do it during the national anthem? Do it before the game. Do it after the game. Do it whenever you want. Do you remember a guy named Reggie White?
Yeah.
Reggie White was a great, great, great football player. Just a Hall of Fame great guy. But do you know what he did every game? He took a knee with all of his men, and he got in a circle and prayed. See the difference?
Yeah.
And he didn't do it during the national anthem. He did something that mattered, and it didn't piss anybody off in the whole world because it was from his heart, it was religious, and he was making a statement. What am I supposed to say? Don't take a knee and pray? He was taking a knee and praying. Now, you can't even pray anymore. You can't pray in high school. You can't pray in college. You can't do anything because we're all against religion when it comes to praying. That's so stupid because our country was founded on a Judeo-Christian philosophy and way of life. So why is it that we can't do that today? Why is that so anti-everything? It's just all muckety-muck, and it gets muckier because it's all about getting recognition on television and not about doing the right thing. So that's why I wanted to kick Roger Goodell's ass, because he wasn't doing the right thing. He could have said, day one, we're not doing this. This is not what we do. It's not who we are. If you can't do certain things in the NFL, you can't take drugs, you can't do that, you have to take tests, then there's certain things you don't do. And one of them, I feel, is that. And it starts everywhere now. I mean, you have kids in grammar school taking knees. They don't even know why they're taking a knee. They're just taking a knee. They're angry about everything. Well, guess what? You've been in law enforcement. You know as well as I do. There are good guys and bad guys, and race does not matter when it's being a bad guy. You're a bad guy, you pay. But is there a lot of guys who are upset that these stupid officers are going after a guy just because he's black? Yeah, that's as fucking antiquated as I can think. I can't even comprehend the kind of bullshit that goes on. And I was fortunate, like you, to be in units where it didn't matter. There was no such thing as black Marine, white Marine, green Marine, red. We were just Marines, and we served together, and we cared for each other, and that was it. We just loved each other. I don't know how to do that other stuff, and I guess I'm just a dinosaur that way. But my father was a functional illiterate with a 7th grade education who could barely read the front page of the newspaper, and when we were children, he told us, you do not judge a person by how they look. No one chooses their parents. Treat everybody the way you want to be treated. And this is a man with a 7th grade education that knew that. He was morally sound that way. So we didn't grow up with any of that kind of bullshit. It just doesn't fathom in our thinking. I was trying to tell somebody one time about racism, for instance, in America and the things that we have to deal with, whether you're in the military or not. I have children. I have 7 boys. And when my boys watch Michael Jordan play basketball, they never, ever, ever thought of him as a black basketball player. They thought of him as the greatest basketball player in the world. Yeah. Do you think they give a fuck what color he is? He can do shit that nobody else could do. I started watching golf. I never golfed a day in my life. I started watching golf because this young guy came around and was the baddest golf player in the world. And he happened to be black, but who gives a fuck? He also is the best. And so when you're watching it, he got me to watch golf games. Yeah. His color was as insignificant as his fucking putter. It didn't matter. What mattered is he was the greatest. The first person I wanted to vote for in the last election was Ben Carson, the greatest neurosurgeon on the planet. He separated 2 kids from the brain, and they're still alive 19 years later. So I followed this guy for years. I met him. I met him. I got a book signed for him. And I'm like, do you think I give a fuck what color he is? He is the best neurosurgeon on the planet. And that's how we're supposed to look at people, by who they are and how they treat us. Right. There's a woman, and I got to mention her because her name's Beverly, and she's from Jamaica. And she's a nurse, and she was on the 12th floor with me the last time I was in the hospital for a month. And nobody would come in my room because I was the meanest motherfucker on the floor. I didn't take anything from anybody. I had a sign on the door, knock before entering. And nobody wants to do it. And so I would throw them out of my room. I would throw doctors out. Get out of my room, you're an idiot. And so she comes in and she's standing at the bottom of my bed. God bless her. She looks at me and she goes, so they tell me you're the problem child up here. And I go, I'm not a problem child. I'm just a prick. She goes, okay. And she and I became dear friends. In fact, we were just texting yesterday. And I haven't seen her since I left the hospital on July of last year. But we communicate because I love her. She is hands down the nicest, best nurse in that hospital. And the fact that this woman is black is as insignificant as flea shit. She is the best nurse there, hands down. And she made me feel special every day I was in there. And she would start her day off by coming in there first and going, ta-da! And I was like, you see, it's like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. But racism is stupid. Sexism is stupid. Why a woman can't do this or a guy can't. Yeah. It's just wrong. We have to evolve. And in order to do that, we have to be morally organized. You have to do things that are morally correct. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it all goes back to what we learned in the military. How do we become Marines? What did we learn? What are we doing? Buddy up. We treat each other with respect. First, last, and always. That's all there is to it. So, yeah, I don't like Colin Kaepernick, but there's many reasons, and I'm sure he took a knee for the right reason in his head. But what he started was just bullshit, and it just flamed all over the country.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessary. It really wasn't necessary. You know, I could go on and on about those kinds of things, but frustrating.
So, what I've been seeing a lot of is about, and it's something that actually affects you directly, is a lot of our, we're part of the Force Recon Association, and a lot of our brothers from Vietnam who are now having complications from Agent Orange. I think Herm was having some issues. A couple other brothers that we just had a brother, and I want to say he was out in Texas that just passed due to complications from Agent Orange. And like I said, my buddy Nick Walker passed from complications from Agent Orange. Could you educate some of these guys on some of the effects that you guys, and some of the things that a lot of young people don't even know, what Agent Orange is. And
Agent Orange was a concept that was ordered by a guy named Admiral Zumwalt, who was the senior ranking officer in the Pacific Theater. And interestingly enough, the first big name person who died from Agent Orange was his son, a lieutenant in the Navy who was in the Brownwater Navy on the speedboats going up and down near Saigon. And that is a tragedy. But what they did, somebody thought that it would be smart to go to Vietnam and spray the jungles and defoliate the jungle, which means all the leaves would roll up and die and fall off the trees, and then the people could come by, fly with their planes, and see the enemy moving around in the jungle. Well, that was a great idea on paper, but the reality of it is we lived in Vietnam in a 3-tier jungle, 60 feet, 80 feet, and 120 feet. And so when you spray the top canopy and you come over in your planes and spray it, it gets all on the first ones, and some of the leaves fall and some don't. But the other leaves in the 80 foot and 60 foot, they don't get affected at all. But when it rains, which is like a lot,
right,
all of the Agent Orange goes down onto the ground. It killed a lot of birds, a lot of monkeys, a lot of animals. The people over there have a lot of side effects. And those of us who were in the field during the spraying, which they didn't tell us about, we were literally drinking water in the streams with Agent Orange in it, and it got into our systems. Now, you can literally, by the way, for 39 years, the VA in the United States of America said there was no such thing as Agent Orange. 39 years. Then they would have you come in and be tested. It was a 2-hour physical on Saturdays to see if you were, in fact, infected with Agent Orange. Those tests were as useless as tits on a bull. They proved nothing. But what you can do is you can go and look at an area. We were in I Corps, or the Northern Corps, 1 Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, 4 Corps. There were 4 corps in Vietnam. The Marines were all up in the I Corps. And you can literally look up what days they sprayed and where. The Air Force has all those records, and you can literally take overlays and lay it over your area of operation. My AO was from Charlie Ridge, west of Da Nang, all the way up to Ashall Valley on the lip at 744. We worked that whole area all the time. We were always up in that area working. And when we were up there, they were spraying us. And they sprayed our AO, or our area of operation, so much that when you look at the overlays, it's not orange anymore, it's purple. That's how many times they sprayed us. So I have lost quite a few guys from Agent Orange. And what Agent Orange does is once it's in your system, you can't just get it out. There's no pills for it and stuff like that. But it runs through your system. I'll give you an example. My dearest friend from Vietnam was Duke Mitten. Duke died on June 23rd, 2013 in the VA hospital in Tampa. I spent 63 days with him in his final stage of life. And I never left his side when I was in that hospital with him. And he called me one day and said, I have stage 4 cancer in my stomach. And he was in the VA hospital, and I was in Fort Lauderdale. And it's about 3.5, 4-hour ride. And he took a nap, and I flew over on my bike, and he opened his eyes, and I was there, and he went, "How did you get here?" And I go, "I flew." And of course I did. I didn't go in the 100 all the way over there. But he was my best bro. And so he was dying of Agent Orange. And then it went from there to his kidneys, to his liver, and it started to run through the lymph nodes in his body. And one day he had a zit on his forehead. And 3 days later, it was a 3-inch lesion across his forehead. Another day, he got a zit on his chest, and it grew to 4 inches across his chest. It was just a cancerous tumor. And they literally went into his backbone and started 3 different sections. The tumors got so big, they separated his backbone in 3 places, and they had to put him in some kind of harness to where he could just sit up on his pillow, just lay back on his pillow, because otherwise he would just fall over. And these are the kinds of things that are happening right before your eyes. It's just destroying you, and you there's not a thing you can do but be with him and stay with him. And I miss him because he really was my dear, dear friend. And I didn't know. It was 29 years after the war. I got in touch with him again, and we talked every Friday night after that. Duke Minton, I put up for 3 silver stars in a 20-day period.
Wow.
He was a hero's hero. He gave him a lousy fucking Bronze Star. That's enough for him. He's just a fucking lousy enlisted man. Save the Silver Stars for the officer corps. Fuck the guys getting them in the field. So that's the way we were treated. We were treated like secondhand creatures. In fact, not only didn't they tell us about Agent Orange, but when we left Vietnam, I rated 4 rows of ribbons. They gave us the standard 3 ribbons. The National Defense, the Vietnam Service, and the Vietnam Campaign. Everybody got 3 ribbons, and that was it. They didn't write it in your fucking records. They didn't do anything. They put it on microfiche. You had to look it up to find out what you rated. But that's the way they treated us. Instead of having a man come home with 4 rows of ribbons and walk down the street and say, "Hey, I'm a hardened combat veteran. I fought hard for my country," they gave everybody the same 3 medals. It was just bullshit. They didn't want to do anything for the Vietnam veterans. And for every man in the field fighting for his life and for his country, there were 31 in the rear with the gear and the beer. Whether they were in S1, whether they were changing tires, whether they were in motor pool, it made no difference. They had jobs for everything. But only one was out in the field fighting. So we didn't really like the guys in the rear. You know, they're called REMS, rear echelon motherfuckers, and we didn't like them. As a matter of fact, we respected the NVA that we fought and the VC that we fought because they were fighters and they were honorable. These guys in the rear, we had no time for them. So when somebody says to me, "Oh, I served in Vietnam," who were you with? First question, what's your MLS? "Oh, I was in FLC, Fleet Landing Force, back at the... "Oh, okay, so you were taking the cargo off the ships. Good." And, 3 hots in a cot? Yeah, 3 hots in a cot. Got 3 hot meals a day and lived in a nice little, hardback building with a, mattress and a bunk, and had a little refrigerator next to it, for keeping my beer cold. We didn't have that. And so those of us who actually served and were treated the way we were, even by our own Marine Corps. I blame the Marine Corps. I blame the fact that they didn't give my men the ribbons and the medals that they deserved. They didn't. I don't know why, but it was like, I'm not going to write that up. I'm just going to give them the same 3 all the time because I'm back here at Division. I'm in the 1 shop. And they were really angry with us, I guess. So we came home and nobody knew. And nobody in my unit knew until we went to our first reunion 30 years after Allenbrook. I was at Washington, D.C. at the home of the 8th and I. I had called and set it up to where we went there. I told the colonel 6 months before we arrived, I said, "I have a man I put up for 3 silver stars, and they never gave him one. I'm really pissed about that." And he goes, "Really? What was his name?" I said, "Duke." Duke Minton was my best friend, and he was one heroic son of a gun. And the first night we're there at 8th and I, we're sitting in the VIP section, and this colonel walks up, and he goes, "Hey, Gunny," and I'm in a suit and tie like an idiot because it's 100 degrees, and they're all in T-shirts. And he said...
you didn't get the memo.
He says, "Hey, Gunny, I'm looking for a hero." And there was only 21 of us. I said, "Sir, they're all heroes to me." And he goes, "I'm looking for a special hero." And he goes, "Is there a Duke here?" 6 months before, I told this colonel this on the phone. This is the caliber leader he was. And Duke stood up and he goes, "Sir," and he comes over and he shakes his hand and he puts his other hand on the back of his hand and he goes, "It's okay that I shake your hand, right, Marine?" And he goes, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I want to tell my grandchildren someday I met a real American hero. And I'm trying to film that. I can't see through the goddamn camera to film it." And he said to Duke, he said, "What an honor to meet you." And he turns and he walks out to the middle of the field. Duke looks over at me and he goes, fuck you. That man walked out to the middle of left field, stopped, stood at attention. Now, you know there's 5,000 people there Friday night.
Yeah. It's a big day.
It's Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, so he spins around, he does an about face, and he stands there, and it gets quieter and quieter and quieter. Because everybody's like, what the fuck's he doing? Nobody's ever done this before. And he says, we never, ever, ever break from tradition here at 8th and I. But I am compelled to do so tonight. And I need everyone here to stand and welcome home the heroes of Vietnam. That's right.
Wow.
My company. That's right. He said that. And my men were blown away. I was blown away. I didn't know he was going to do that. But he knew who we were. And he knew what we had done. And we stood in May of 68. We stood and stopped them from taking Da Nang. The war would have been over in May of 68 had we not done our job. It cost us dearly, of course. But my men stood. And they stood tough. And that's why I tell people I walked among heroes, because I did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Duke was one of them, and then he was in the hospital, and I was with him every day. And one day, this male nurse said to me, why is it, Mr. Parsons, that only you can hold that portable urinal for him to pee, and he won't let his wife do it, he won't let nurses or doctors do it? Why are you allowed to do it? And I said, Doc, I got more time playing with his dick and balls in Vietnam, because we every time we crossed the stream, we had to take the leeches off each other. But he wouldn't let anybody else hold it but me. It was just funny. It was just who we were. And about 10 days before he died, and he was really, really bad. I mean, really bad. I don't know how he held on that long. And he woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he's going, Jake, I'm scared. Jake, I'm scared. Jake, I'm so I took my hand and put it on his forehead, and I leaned him back into the pillow, and I leaned down, and I go, do you hear mortars? And he went, no. And I go, then we're not scared, motherfucker. And we started to laugh, because until you've been under the amount of mortars that we were under, you don't appreciate scare. And so we started to laugh. They had to come down and close the door. They don't close the door in the hospice. They keep the doors open. Yeah. They come down and close the door. It was 2 in the morning, and we were laughing too hard. We stayed up till 6 in the morning laughing and talking, but I was glad I was there for him with that. I mean, those are the kinds of things that I get to keep. You know, that's my memory. And then, of course, the morning he died, he was, just barely. He was just, and he just wouldn't quit. So I got to tell him in his ear, Duke, it's okay. Let it go. We got you. And he died. And I drove from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale. The tears were coming down my face so hard that they were blowing back up on my glasses, and I couldn't see, so I had to take my glasses off in order to ride my motorcycle. That was a long drive. But,
I can imagine.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I remember, when Nick passed, this guy, you're talking about a guy who was active, man. Like, he used to climb mountains, he was in his 60s. He used to climb mountains. Guy, I mean, he would climb mountains and go whitewater rafting, and, a lot of people don't know, the caliber of person he was, because he was so quiet. He was just, he was like
a really, type A personality.
Yeah, but he was such a quiet guy, like just a quiet professional. And one of the facts that people didn't know about him is years ago, I don't know if you remember, when the plane crashed in the Potomac. Remember that?
Yes, of course. It was a winter day. Yeah,
exactly. It was freezing.
Yes.
The water was frozen over. Nick Walker jumped in the water and saved a bunch of people off that were in the water when the plane crashed.
That's him?
He jumped in the water and saved
Big balls in Cowtown. Yeah. Oh, man, that was freezing. Yeah.
You never know that he did it. He never bragged about it. Never, you know what I mean? Just, only reason I know is because, his wife actually told me the story. So that's how I found out about it. But
that was one bad mother humper.
And just an amazing guy, man. And I remember, I still remember the day that we found out that he was sick. It was like a Friday. So he went on a cruise. He was going on a cruise with his wife, and his doctor called him up and said, the doctor was oncologist was such a douchebag. He, had no bedside manner. He told me, said, listen, you have stage 4 liver cancer, and, I suggest you get your affairs in order. He's leaving on a cruise with his wife that day. So he comes back, And I never forget. I remember like it was yesterday, and he sends out an email to the office to say, hey, you know, that he had liver cancer, and the way he realized he was sick was that the guy was always in shape. You know, even as an older guy, he was in shape, and his stomach just started to get bloated. You know, so he went to his doctor, and that's how they found out. And they said that, I guess from his time in Vietnam, he got Hep C. Which a lot of guys in Vietnam, you know, got Hep C and all kinds of other stuff out there. And because of the Hep C, it damaged his liver. So his liver was 75% gone. So he couldn't get on a transplant list or anything like that. And I mean, within, you know, I remember going and when he was in the hospital here before he left to go up to Maryland, I would go to see him at the hospital and spend hours at the hospital with him and just talk to him. And it was tough. Like, you know, just, you know, we laugh, you know, because I think at that point he needed the laughter, and he just had a calm about him. You know what I mean? Like, he was just calm. He said, you know what? He goes, listen, man. He goes, I've made peace with this, and, you know, and I'm in a good space. He goes, I'm in a good place. And it's hard to talk to somebody and have them tell you know what, they've accepted that, you know, they're not going to be here anymore. And he flew up to Maryland because he wanted to go and see his kids, see his son, you know, and spend time with his wife and his son and his family up there, his brother. And he went to cardiac arrest on the plane. They landed in Maryland, and he went into cardiac arrest on the plane and passed away. So,
but he was still trying.
He was still trying to fight.
That's,
you know.
right.
So I made his paddle, and I took myself and a bunch of other Marines, you know, buddy, another Recon Marine, my buddy Michael. We kind of took it on like a world tour. So I went and took it all over the place. Took it to Paris Island, because he was in 2nd Battalion, 2nd and 9.
The sissies.
There's only one battalion, 2nd Battalion, 2nd and 9.
Third.
So I took it to Paris Island. I hadn't been to Paris Island in years, and I took it there. Took it to his deck. Got all the drill instructors to sign it. Took it to Lejeune. Got a bunch of guys, you know, from Recon Battalion over there to sign. Bunch of our brothers that, you know, from down here that, you know, that part of the community, they all signed it. And then I took a road trip up to his wife in Maryland and brought it to her in Maryland. And, you know, and we had before, we didn't get to have a paddle party for him. So we had my buddies at Smokin' gave us their private room, and we had a paddle party for him. I got shirts printed up, and we had about probably 50 guys there, and smoked cigars and drank and told stories about him, and, you know, and it was a great event.
And laughed,
you know, and it was a great event. And so we made a memorial video, and I took that up with the paddle to his wife, and we actually made a collection for her and gave it to her to give to either to take and donate or do whatever she wanted to do. But it was tough. You know, every year, you know, his birthday's in August, so every year, you know, it kind of reminds me, you know, to do something special. But, you know, it's tough when you lose your, you know, you lose brothers to stuff that you had no control over, you know.
Like you were mentioning earlier about the Leathernecks Motorcycle Club. I was in the Leathernecks for 4 or 5 years. I can't remember now, but I was vice president. And when you bring somebody into the club, you're their daddy. That's the term we use. And so I brought this guy in. His road name was Gunner. I was Gunny. And he was Gunner because he was a machine gunner in Vietnam. And he was wounded twice, and he was wounded so badly the second time he spent 18 months in the hospital recovering. I mean, his whole stomach was still messed up from when he got hit. And he was just a tough old dude. So he joins us, and he's got 6 months to live. He's terminal from Agent Orange cancer. But he's tough. And so he rides with us all the time. He's just a great guy. He never was negative. He was never down. He was just always up. In fact, he used to go to the VA, and he would take a little cooler kit, and he would, inside of it was a 6-pack of beer, and he would sit there in the VA and drink. One time they fined him $50 for doing that. But that's the way he was. So Gunner was cool. And his wife was just a dear. And so she calls me one day and she goes, Gunny, I'm worried. I can't get him to. So he was sitting on the sofa and he had one of these coffee tables that goes up and down. So he's up and he's laying on it. He's got his cigarette in his finger, and it's got an ash about 2 inches long sitting on it, and he can't get his head up off the table. And he's just about as dead as you can get. So I come in and I put my hand on him. I go, listen, we got to go. We got to go to the hospice because, you're worrying your wife. And he goes, no, give me one more day. And I went, no, you're coming with me. So he had a robe on, his skivvies on and stuff. We closed his robe, and I called a guy named Barber, and the two of us took him out and put him in a pickup truck and took him to the VA. We couldn't use the ambulance because that's $1,000.
Yeah.
So he was in Davie. So we took him down to the hospital, put him in. The next day I had an appointment, so I went to see him, and I walked in, and here was this nurse, and she had her eyes were this big. She goes, are you the Gunny? She goes, yeah. He goes, I can't. And so he was just rolling and writhing on the bed. His stomach was moving, and he was just dying. And I'm like, oh, God. So I grab his hand, and I put my hand on his forehead, and it's smoking hot, burning up. So I ran over, grabbed a towel, put cool water on it, put it on his head. 30 seconds later, I flipped it over, and it was burning on one side. So I kept doing it until I could get his temperature down. And I'm talking to him, and I'm holding his hand, and he actually could hold really tight. And I'm saying to him, listen, man, just ride this out. And so finally, after about 20 minutes, he starts to sleep, and his stomach starts writhing all over. It stops. And I can't stand up now. I've been bent over the bed so long, I cannot get up. And fortunately, I turned around, and in came his wife, and I said, help me up. And so she lifted me up. And as she did that, in came Mercy, who from hospice. And so she brought the bed in to remove him out of the hospital that he was in, take him in a gurney up to hospice. And at that time, I turned around, and 2 Marines and a corpsman from the Leathernecks all came in, and they escorted him upstairs, and they stayed with him, and he died at 3 o'clock. But he wasn't alone, and everybody was with him, So it's amazing how fast it eats you up. Some people go quick. Some people, like my buddy Duke, he was in hospice for almost, 2 months and a week. And he stayed. I don't know. Usually they're done a week or 10 days, and they're done in hospice. Yeah. He stayed the course. He was tough. He was a good old boy. But you never get over missing somebody that was your best buddy in combat. Back when shit was deep, you were knee deep in hand grenades. That was the kind of guy you wanted with you. And so I'm going to have a reunion this year in August here in Fort Lauderdale for those still alive. And Duke won't be there, and that's to be sorely missed because everybody loved Duke. He was just a class clown. But some of the guys that are coming are absolutely incredible heroes. I have a corpsman I put up for 2 silver stars, and they gave him a bronze star. They gave Duke a bronze star, and they gave Haney a bronze star, and I put him up for a silver star. He led the attack from his platoon. That picture that you see that I've shown you before of the guys on line charging, the guy out in front was Haney. He grew up next to Joe Namath in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania, and he let us know that every day we were in country. We got tired of hearing about Joe Namath. And that was before we won the Super Bowl. Then it went off the charts. But these kind of guys, they're just from every small town in America. There's a guy named Vernon Post I have to talk about. Vernon Post came from a little town in South Jersey, and he and I ice skated together in Strawbridge Lake in my town when we were younger. He was older than me by 6 years. He had been in the Navy for 4 years, got out, went in the Marine Corps, went to Vietnam, went back, was a corporal at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. He couldn't stand watching the news, so he came back, volunteered, came back to Vietnam, and we picked him up. And he was the best machine gunner God ever put on this earth. He was bad to the bone with a gun. We wouldn't. If he was with us, we were golden. We knew that nobody could ever take us out because he was that good on a machine gun. And one day, he said to me, Jake, this isn't my war anymore. And I said, what? And he goes, I'm going to die today. And I went, don't say that. And he goes, I know. And we're at the bottom of Hai Bang Pass. And we're sitting there with, canteen cups with hot coffee and smoking a cigarette. And I said, stay with me. I'm in the second truck. He goes, no, I got to be on the first. I got the gun. And I go, stay with me anyway. And he goes, no, I got to go. But today's my last day. It's not my war anymore. And that's morose, but that's how he was. So we go up the hill, and it's dark by the time we get up near the top, and they open up on us, and the first guy dead is Vernon. He's got three bullets in his back, and 2 other guys died, and one of them was a Navy CB, because we were on CB trucks. We were the security for them. I stayed with him all that night up on High Long Pass, and I would just talk to him and rub his hair. And people used to say to me, "Why do you do that?" And I go, "I don't know what they can and can't hear, so I just keep talking to him in case they can." And I just rubbed my fingers to his hair, because we didn't have body bags. We only had ponchos, and the hair would stick out. And the poncho on the top of the hill, because it's real high up, the tallest mountain around, it would slap, slap, slap from the wind coming off the ocean. So in the morning, we put him on a helicopter, and we leave, and we go on with our lives, and we go on with our battles and stuff. And I start looking for him when I come home, because he said he lived in Woodbury, New Jersey, which he didn't. Woodbury was the county seat. So years and years I look for him. I can't find him. And so I'm on recruiting duty, and the guys from the Marine Corps League come to visit me one time, and we start talking. And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to find this guy Vernon Post. He's not on the records. He was never in Woodbury. I don't know what." So the next day, on the front page of the Gloucester County Times, 2 inches high, it says he told me he was going to die, and there's the whole story of Vernon Post. My phone started ringing that day, and it was the Post family calling me. They lived in a little town called Eager, which was like 20 miles south of where I was. And this woman called me, and I could tell she was serious, because she was dead serious on the phone. She goes, "I'm married to Jack Post, Vernon's brother, and we need to meet you." And I said, "I need to meet you too." And it was near Memorial Day, so I talked on Memorial Day at Paulsboro. Then I went to their house. They lived on New Freedom Road. Go figure. So I go into the house, and all the family, all the cousins, they're all in this living room. And up against the far walls, this guy's sitting there with a baseball hat on, dark sunglasses, and it's Jack Post. This is very hard for him, because it's been 21 years since his brother died. I said, "I didn't come here to open all wounds. I came here to tell you all something that you need to know. You all know Vernon, the kid who grew up here, and you all know him as who he was to the family. But let me tell you who he was to us. He was our hero. We loved having him with us on patrol or on operations, because his gun never stopped. He was the baddest guy we ever worked with." And while I'm talking to them, this kid comes walking in the room, and he goes, "Hey, Mr. Parsons, how you doing?" He was a Boy Scout. I used to train Boy Scouts. I was training him in survival in Roosevelt Park down in South Jersey. And this kid, who was the #1 student that I had, teaching him how to live without sleeping bags and without blankets in November, and how to make a fire, Indian high tall, and how to cook up chickens and stuff. And this kid was good. I had no idea his last name was Post. I had no idea. I'm just blown away that this kid, who I thought was the coolest Boy Scout at that camp the last November, is related to Vernon Post. You tell me.
Wow.
Tell me that's not weird. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm talking with the family, and they're all asking me lots of questions, and it's going really well. So all of a sudden, Jack said to me, "Would you like to see Vernon's grave?" And I went, "Oh, yes, sir, that would be." So he takes me in his pickup truck, and we go down, and we go to this little cemetery, and it's up about 10 feet above the farmland, and it's got a big metal fence around it and stuff, and there's maybe 35, 40 graves in there. And I noticed when I got up there that every one of them had a flag on it. It dawned on me that small town America is where it's all about, Cities are cities are cities, but little Americana is right here in these little towns where all these guys served, and they served in different wars for their country. And it was like a thing you just do. You don't even question it. You do it. So I'm standing there talking to Jack, looking down at Vernon's stone, and the flag is there on top of the stone. And it's going flap, 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 flap. And I said,
Wow.
"Jack, the night that Vernon died, I spent the whole night with him, and his poncho sounded just like this flag. It went flap, flap, flap. And he turned and laid his head on my shoulder and wept openly for 20 minutes. But so did I.
Wow.
It blew me away that exact sound 21 years later was at a gravesite from the night he died. And if you tell me there isn't a Lord, I'll tell you, you have no idea what's going on out here. But that was amazing for me, because it was closure. And it was amazing for Jack, because it was closure for him too. Even though he had buried his brother, he never really knew the whole picture of who Vernon was and how he died and things like that. So, those are stories that have to be told. That's coming into the book. Vernon Post was an incredible, incredible guy. It broke my heart the night he died. I sat with him the whole night, never left him. I don't know why I do that, but I do. I just do those things. sounds stupid to some people, but I'm toast. I'm done.
So, you got anything you wanna say before we're done?
No, I just want to say, if you're watching this and you don't know anything about the Buddy Up program, you really need to look into it, because there are so many people who will benefit just by you being there. It's amazing how no matter whether you're there on your first night or you've been doing it for years, you affect people and you get something out of it, but you also give something. Every person matters in these meetings, and every person is family. And so if you're having a tough day, trust me, we know about tough days. We wrote the book on them. But do something. Hit the button. Make the call. Somebody will get in touch with you. And you will find that you will benefit greatly from being involved with people like yourself, of like minds, who need to walk together with other people. Every day, we're friends for life. So think about it.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us for our first episode of Storytime with Gunny. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.